On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we talk with AT&T to get an update on their extensive virtualization plans.
Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com. CommScope, thinking beyond today's technology to help you make the best decision for your network and your business.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief of RCR Wireless News. And today we are joined by Andre Fuetsch, who's the SVP of Network and Design for AT&T. Hey, Andre, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Good to be here. Thanks, Dan.
Great. Well, obviously, AT&T has been at the forefront when it comes to the NFV and SDN revolution, seemingly coming across the telecom market. I know you guys, I guess about 7 or 8 months ago now, announced, at least publicly, kind of a big push for SDN and NFV and virtualization in general. I know you guys have been working on it, beyond that as well. But actually, again, a pretty long time you're working on the topic. So hoping to get from you guys just an update on what's been going on. So yeah, maybe I guess a quick update from you on kind of what's the progress been over the past 7 or 8 months that you guys have kind of announced the big program. I know you've had a lot of announcements about it, but hoping to get from you just some insight there on what's been going on in terms internally at AT&T on the progress.
Yeah, sure, Dan. We've actually made some great headway here. As we announced in the early part or late part of last year, we set a pretty ambitious goal out there, and that is to virtualize and software control over 75% of our network over the next 5 years. And a pretty ambitious goal. And so we've made some great progress here. Right now, our goal for the year for 2015 is actually 5% of that 75. So although it may sound like a small percentage, we're actually building a lot of the basic building blocks that will allow us to ramp up much faster in the coming years. So part of that goal was to actually focus on a couple key areas. And frankly, one of the big areas, in fact, we've been fairly public about, is launching this layer 2 service out there called Network on Demand. And this is a service that basically gives our customers the ability to dynamically control speed between their sites. And this is just the beginning of where that project is going. Just at the end of the first quarter, we actually we launched that service in a trial mode last year. End of this first quarter of this year, we actually opened it up to over 100 markets. So we're now selling it. We're getting great demand on this, no pun intended. But Network on Demand has really been one of our cornerstone products and services that's demonstrating software-defined networking in action. Yeah. Another area that we launched also this year is mobile call recording, which is basically a service for enterprise-based customers that would like to extend some of their call recording features to their mobile like field agents or some of their like brokerage houses that have a need to record their calls. All of that is being executed, deployed on a fully virtualized platform that's orchestrated as well as service chained together. And then additionally, we've been introducing our evolved packet core, our virtualized mobile packet core. And we've launched that. We have several 100,000 subscribers on that platform today. In the second half of the year, that's going to be moving up into the millions. So that's going very well. So a lot of great progress here in kicking off the program for 2015.
Sure. I mean, obviously you say the 5% for the year might not seem like a big number, but like you said, you're kind of building something that's completely new, really, and this is the building blocks for it. But even what you're describing, I mean, you're describing stuff that it seems like the people I've talked to, and that's still stuff that's still so out in the future for a lot of people. But you guys were already like putting this stuff actually out in the market. So well, it seemed like a small number. What you guys are actually doing seems like it's pretty advanced compared to what everybody else in the market is doing. So, I wouldn't downplay the 5% part, because again, you guys are doing quite a bit out there and kind of leading really what the market is looking to do in these services. So it sounds like you guys are actually being somewhat aggressive, really trying to get stuff rolled out.
Yeah, that's right. And so, part of this too, I mean, it's not just about, hey, taking a traditionally network appliance and just, porting it over to the cloud. It's also taking that virtualized software now and putting it under SDN control, and then also integrating it into, frankly, a new operational management framework. And this is really important because, frankly, that's what's going to allow us to get the operational efficiencies that we need. That's what allows a lot of the orchestration and automation that we expect to have. So again, it's not a simple software port over. There's a lot of moving parts to this.
Yeah.
And again, as I mentioned, we're building a lot of this foundational work this year, and of course it'll continue on and evolve. But to really get it out there, exercise it, and test it, you got to start with good, working services, do it in a very controlled manner. But that's basically the process we're taking, a very methodical process to launching these, frankly, new technology.
Yeah, and that's part of it. It seems like too, because a lot of this is a lot of new technology, but also a lot of new vendors to the telecom space you guys I know are working with on this too. So I'm guessing there's some challenges there in trying to work with companies that perhaps don't have that telecom background, but are now bringing technologies that have perhaps been used in the data centers or IT centers previously to this new space where, obviously telecom has probably a higher quality standard perhaps than a lot of other areas might. So I'm guessing that's going to be a bit of a challenge, working with some of these new players to kind of bring them up to speed and make sure that they know, when you guys are saying we need this sort of reliability, it's not a 3 nines or 4 nines, it's kind of a 5 nines type of environment that you guys are used to working in. I'm guessing that's been a bit of a challenge as well for you guys.
Yeah, it is. It's, traditionally we've been a network operator.
Yeah.
We haven't been a software company. So, much like, how we approach application performance, application reliability, if it were like a voice service, we really built it from the bottoms up.
Yeah.
Right. So that meant going after, custom dedicated hardware. We would build that reliability and scale all the way up through the stack. The web scale companies took this very different approach, a very tops-down approach.
Yeah.
The opposite, where they built the scale and the reliability, frankly, in the software running on top of commoditized cheap hardware. And so we're taking, best practices from both and creating a whole new model. And you're right, we are working with, a lot of the traditional vendors that we've worked with for decades, but also we're introducing some newer, smaller software, frankly, disruptors into the mix as well. And I think that's an important part of this ecosystem as we make this transformation from a very hardware-centric company to a much more software-centric company.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How has that ecosystem been developing? Because that does seem that's been a bit of a challenge in kind of getting these legacy telecom operators to work perhaps a little more closely with some of these newer players, because it does seem traditionally there's, those companies had a lot of proprietary or hardware and software, and, they were very rigid in how they dealt with that. But it seems like in this new environment and this new ecosystem that you guys are really pushing, it has to be a lot more collaborative, it seems. And so I'm guessing the ecosystems had to kind of change and evolve to the new paradigm now that's kind of been pushed out there.
Yeah, so that is a great question because, part of this shift to open, I call it, is basically, moving out of these proprietary standards. And, I want to be careful here because there's still a lot of standards that are very important that we're depending on. So we actually, there's frankly a parallel effort here. We still work very closely with the typical standard bodies out there, IETF, ETSI, IEEE. A lot of those are very key in where we go forward, but we're also working with the larger ecosystem in the software area and open source. So there's a lot of consortiums and alliances out there that we're also leading as well as working with because as we move to this more software-centric world, we realize that's those are the forms that that work gets done in. So we're, basically working them both. And again, a lot of this is still in its infancy, and it's evolving. But as we get, more adept, as we get more confidence in a particular area, as we try to put, frankly, a lot of the things we've built internally, move them to the open, because the open source is, it's a two-way street, right? It's not just taking things in, but it's also giving back. And frankly, this year we've done some big things here, where we, as an example, we released to open source one of our policy engines that we put out there that we're actually using internally within AT&T. We're also working with several of the big software controllers out there, and those being, frankly, code bases based on Open Daylight, as well as ON Labs ONOS, as an example. We're also very involved in OP NFV as another great example. So a lot going out there in this much larger ecosystem, and really, to go fast, you really need to play in all areas.
Sure. I mean, and that seems like a big challenge too, because you bring up all these organizations that have sprouted up over the past 12 to 18 months who are doing a lot of work in these fields. Etsy obviously has been there a lot longer than that, but OPNFV and ON Lab and companies like that, organizations like that. And it seems like, the work having to, again, you guys are kind of at the forefront of this. So you guys are pushing to get this stuff out there as quick as possible, but there are the standards and the back and forth issues that are also, like you said, kind of being played on the other side as well, where, obviously you want to get this out as soon as you can, but you have to look towards the future a little bit too, to make sure that these things, can be backwards compatible, and there's, other things like that to deal with. So I'm guessing that's kind of a bit of, like you said, kind of a bit of a challenge for you guys to kind of handle those kind of, like you said, do almost dual tracks really, and trying to make sure, you guys are getting what you need, but also playing with these other bodies as well.
Right. Yeah, a lot going on there. And you mentioned it. I mean, interoperability is really important.
Yeah.
So certainly the standards forums are very key to make those things happen, where we have to have these these meet points. And also, we're still dealing with a lot of regulation too.
Yeah.
And so it's important there that we have continuity there. So again, it's a new ecosystem, and we've got our tentacles and all of those major bodies out there.
Yeah, well, I know, talking with those bodies, I've talked to them a lot here recently. They're very happy to have a big carrier involved in this too. So I'm guessing, for you guys, I'm sure it's a very nice collaborative effort. But I know from talking to them, they're very appreciative of having a client out there, a customer out there who's actually pushing this and wanting this to really be out there. So it seems like it's progressing pretty well. I know you guys mentioned, you are doing quite a bit with your initial rollouts, at least in terms of targeting the enterprise space. Does that still seem like kind of the main, at least initial focus for a lot of these SDN NFV controlled services? Is that kind of what you see as perhaps the maybe the low-hanging fruit at this point, but kind of the easiest to kind of tap into to at least get these services out there and maybe get some scale to these services?
Yeah, I mean, that's been our initial entree into this in terms of products and services. But as I mentioned earlier too, with our mobile packet core, that's also another play that will extend into the mass market consumer-based services. I mean, there's many other things we're looking at as well across the access side of the house, if you will. And also, we're also looking at customer premise equipment, not just for enterprise customers, but also for consumers as well. So as you know, we're now officially, we just got approval from the FCC on Friday with our DirecTV merger.
Yes.
That's underway, and now we're very large in the entertainment business. And as you know, there's a lot of CPE, if you will, on the customer prem there. So we're looking at a lot of solutions to virtualize that could help the experience as well as the cost structure on the prem. And big focus there are gateways, residential gateways, set-top boxes, things like that. All of those components potentially could be virtualized.
Yeah.
Additionally, of course, we're looking out in the radio access network as well. That's obviously a core part of our business going forward. And of course, there's a lot of interest and potential opportunity in virtualizing those components as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we see a lot of extensions, if you will, to help basically the consumer side of the business as well as enterprise.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, yeah, I mean, that mobile part of it, that seems like the trickiest part because mobile has such a, dealing with spectrum and handsets moving around all the time. And it's such a dynamic market to be dealing with a new technology like that. That seems like a huge challenge. And I'm guessing, again, you guys are being pretty aggressive with the mobile evolved packet core already. But I mean, as you look out towards the evolution of virtualization in terms of the mobile network, I mean, how far can that go out there? I mean, because I've heard people talk, you can virtualize everything. It's going to all be virtual in the future. But obviously, you need to have antennas at some point out there and things like that too. But I mean, how far do you see that ability to virtualize on the mobile side of the house there for you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really hard to say at this point. I mean, we certainly are working on and getting our hands wet here in that area. But there's, the number one requirement here is performance.
Yeah.
Okay, and with performance comes reliability. So we have to be very methodical about how we approach. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of folks out there that are very aggressive that think they can virtualize it all. Things that probably can't. And so we're going to do things very carefully. But certainly we think there are opportunities out there, and that's where standards are going to be a big part of this as well, especially with the introduction of 5G. As most folks probably watching this are aware, 5G is sort of taking a very wide approach in terms of how it's going to solution in the future.
Yeah.
And certainly NFV and SDN are play a big role in that. And so we'll have to see over time what pieces and functions we'll virtualize. Again, it gets down to performance. Latency is really, really key. Reliability. Where these electronics go. A lot of these electronics, as folks know, have been very specialized and been, physically placed in specific spots to ensure that performance is maintained. Mm-hmm. But again, as hardware, especially commoditized hardware, improves, as the software layers on top of it that manage that hardware improve, as we get more expansive in our cloud footprint, so that extends out further, that gives us more flexibility and control. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, security. Security is a huge area, and it's top of mind of most are, especially our enterprise customers, but also here and internally, that's priority number one. We got to make sure whatever we deploy there is not just performs well and is reliable, but is also highly secure. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, everything you bring up there, it seems like those challenges from the outside looking in seem enormous. I'm sure from the outside or the inside looking out, I'm sure they're big challenges as well for you guys. I mean, I guess as you look ahead to this, as a kind of final wrap-up question here, what do you see as perhaps the biggest challenge or two for you guys perhaps over the next, 12 months or so and kind of keeping this momentum going? Because again, you guys have done quite a bit over the past 7 months. I'm guessing as you kind of get this kind of layer built, I'm sure it'll start rapidly expanding more and more. I mean, what do you see as kind of being the big challenges you guys are still trying to face in terms of kind of continuing this evolution?
Yeah, I think actually our biggest challenge is more of a cultural challenge. Mm-hmm. I think the technology is moving along at a pretty good pace, mm-hmm. and it's really about how we internally, again, as a traditional hardware-centric operator, network operator, how we can embrace this new world of software. We've a lot of the processes and methodologies that we have in place are based on, very, tried and proven processes that have been developed, frankly, over decades. And a lot of those things change very quick and need to change quickly. Mm-hmm. we've got a very active program internally within the company. We call it our skills transformation. That's how we're moving folks, allowing them to retool, reskill themselves so that they can be more adept, more agile, become more relevant in terms of the demands that we need in the new world, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And also, another big challenge too is the manageability around these new networks. Again, as I mentioned, we've sort of built performance and reliability from the bottom up, right? From a very hardware, fault-tolerant architecture, where we've built in a lot of geographical redundancy,
mm-hmm.
And sparing and all of that. And that really changes in that top-down approach that the web scale companies have used. So the manageability is certainly a big challenge, and I think the cultural challenge is the other big one that we're facing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Obviously, AT&T has a very long history in the telecom space, probably the longest history of the telecom space. Obviously, you guys, like you said, have a lot of entrenched way of doing things. But again, this is a new world, and I know we've talked before about, I think you mentioned before about that cultural change that has to happen there. And at least it seems like you guys have at least have a head start on the process. Obviously, it'll take a while to get everybody on board with that, but I'm sure it sounds like things are happening at a good pace for you guys. And obviously, the technology part of it's coming along too. So all the pieces are kind of falling in place, it seems like, for this continued evolution to your guys' goal of having 75% control by 2020, I think was the plan. So sounds like everything's going at least at a pretty good pace for you guys at this point.
Yeah, they are. It's going quite well. We've got a lot of folks engaged on this. Certainly we're doing a lot externally as well as internally. So we're really excited. I mean, this is, in my 20-year career, this is the most exciting transformation I've been a part of. And this is really a great time and place to be.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds great. Well, hey, Andre, we definitely appreciate the great insight today. Hopefully we can catch up again soon. Like you said, I know we'll be hearing and seeing a lot more from you guys over the next several months and several years, obviously, as this continues to roll out. So hopefully we get some more updates from you guys going forward. But we definitely appreciate the time on this today. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Great insight there from Andre on AT&T's virtualization plans. Well, that'll do it for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. Please make sure to check us out again next week.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.